Is the CafeRacer version faster than the original? Can you fit a CX 650 engine into a CX 500? Can tires completely transform the way a motorcycle behaves? And can a single piece of fabric somehow have two different colors at the same time? Apparently, yes. But perhaps more importantly, what happens when someone watches your motorcycle on YouTube and thinks, right, I'm building one of those? Well, today, you're going to find out. Welcome to Racertv. If you think I'm about to completely redesign Frankenstein's seat, don't panic. That would require effort. What I'm actually doing is something far more dangerous. I'm improving it. Because after nearly 8 years, I finally discovered what was bothering me. As some of you may remember from one of the videos about my Honda, I always felt the seat lacked a bit of volume at the top. And yes, after a quick Photoshop test, the bike already looked much better. But there was still a problem. Something about the silhouette simply refused to cooperate. And then, almost by accident, I slightly raised the lower section of the seat. Not by much, just enough. And suddenly, everything clicked into place. Honestly, it's ridiculous how such a tiny adjustment can completely change the appearance of a motorcycle. But somehow, it did. Notice how the seat finally flows properly into the massive fuel tank. The whole bike suddenly feels more balanced and more muscular, like it's been going to the gym behind my back for the last 8 years. I also took the opportunity to redesign the seat ribs. They're now narrower, thicker, and much closer to what I originally imagined. And thankfully, it's also far more comfortable now, partly because of the new rounded edges, and partly thanks to the talented upholsterer, Mr. Silver. Now, about the color of this genuine lambskin. Honestly, I still have absolutely no idea what color this thing actually is. Sometimes it looks dark brown. Sometimes it looks like a faded old leather jacket from the 1970s. Depending on the lighting, it changes constantly. But I'm willing to give it some time and let nature do its thing. Because if there's one thing sunlight does remarkably well, it's slowly transforming the color of leather and fabric over the years. But let me know what you think about the new seat. After 11,000 kilometers, the tires had finally surrendered. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the same model for the front wheel, which, as it turns out, was an excellent bit of bad luck, because these Michelin Road 5s are absolutely superb. The difference in corners is remarkable. Smoother, more planted, more confidence everywhere. Honestly, I never imagined a set of tires could transform the bike this much. And while I was at it, I also gave the rear end a bit more attitude, swapping the old 150 for a wider 160 tire. Now yes, the Pirellis probably looked a little cooler, but unlike most modern tires, these Michelins don't look like they were designed for a dishwasher. Since the wheels were already apart, Lionel also replaced the spokes, which by this point had all the sparkle of forgotten cutlery. The new stainless steel spokes had to be custom made, because naturally, nothing on this motorcycle likes standard dimensions. Then came the battery. After nearly 8 years, it had finally given up, which frankly seemed entirely reasonable, until I removed it and realized the thing was almost 10 years old. And somehow, despite never seeing a maintenance charger and regularly being abandoned for months at a time, it had kept going. Going back to the beginning of the video, I've always wondered whether Frankenstein had actually become faster than it was in its original form. So naturally, scientific testing was required. Or sort of. This was my best attempt before the building process. Not bad for a motorcycle with just 65 horsepower. But now it was Frankenstein's turn. And immediately things started looking rather interesting. Although, if I'm honest, the launch wasn't perfect, so I tried again. Better, but still not quite the dramatic masterpiece I was hoping for. Then suddenly, now we're talking. This time, the difference was no longer subtle. But why is it faster? Because apart from the air filters and the open exhausts, the only thing I actually changed inside the engine were the carburetor jets. And for the setup, I followed the recommendations of one of the world's leading Honda CX experts, a man who, it turns out, clearly understands these engines far better than Honda did in the 1980s, because the difference is remarkable. The engine is now sharper, more responsive, and pulls with strong, uninterrupted torque right up to 9,000 revolutions per minute, which is precisely what the original factory setup lacked. So technically, maintaining torque higher in the rev range, it reaches 100 kilometers per hour considerably faster. And now, let's move on to another interesting topic. A few years ago, I received a message from an Australian called Steve Kelly. But rather than me explaining it, I'll let Steve do the talking.
Hi guys, well, I got a confession to make. I fell in love. I fell in love with this bike. It was a Honda CX650. It was created by Victor of YouTube Racertv fame. It was made up of the parts of dead motorcycles, and he ended up calling it Frankenstein. I love this bike so much, I had to make one. And so I created Young Frankenstein.
Needless to say, I was incredibly flattered, but also partly worrying. Because suddenly you realize your bad ideas may be spreading internationally. Fortunately, Steve's version turned out to be rather good. What he created is obviously not a copy. It's his own interpretation of Frankenstein, adapted to his personal taste and needs. And considering that his project started with the oldest CX500 platform, I have to say, he did a very good job. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. Even after all that work, Steve still wasn't completely satisfied. Until one day, he decided to do something that many CX fans have talked about for years, but very few have actually done. He replaced the original CX500 engine with a CX650 engine. And yes, it worked. If you visit Steve's YouTube channel, you'll find several videos documenting the entire conversion process, along with plenty of other fascinating projects. In many ways, Steve seems to be doing exactly what most of us dream of doing once we retire. Spending our time building interesting machines and solving mechanical problems simply because we can. So, I can only thank Steve, not only for the inspiration he took from Frankenstein, but also for the inspiration he continues to give to others, including me. Thank you for watching Racertv. And as always, I hope to see you on the next video.